Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, I want to go over an email sent to me by Sean Eddy. He says, "This is from a BYU class with question and answer. I found it on Mormon WikiLeaks, which isn't church friendly, but the talk has a lot of highlights." So here it is. It's in PDF format, and because I cannot verify this myself, um, maybe Sean, if you have any additional information of any sort that can validate that, that'd be great if you could send it to me. But we'll read through this and take it with a grain of salt. You know, who knows how this was transcribed, if it's correct. I haven't read through it yet because I want this to just kind of be a surprise as I read it and give you a raw reaction to it. But whatever the case, I always like to take all information into consideration. Just kind of like on the surface, it looks legit, but you be the judge of that. Before we get into that, just really quick, this is where we're at with the Book of Mormon sharing challenge, aka the Flood the Earth challenge. We have 5,233 copies of the Book of Mormon that have been shared so far. We've had an increase since the last time that I updated this of 5 new people that have joined the challenge. So we have 492 people that have sent out copies of the Book of Mormon. And then of note, we have one more person that's meeting with the missionaries. So since the beginning of this challenge in December, we now have at least 33 people that have met with the missionaries as a result of this. So keep up the good work, you guys. Unfortunately, I haven't had any missionaries or baptisms, but that's okay. And I'm sure most of you haven't either. It's the effort that counts. So just give it out. You never know what's going to happen. And doing something is better than nothing. Even if you don't really know the person very well, just do it. You never know if the Lord has prepared them or not. When you let me know that you've sent a copy of the Book of Mormon, make sure to do hashtag flood the earth so it's easy for me to find, and keep your message short so I can easily find it. And then one more thing. So I confirmed this number of 10 baptisms because with one person, I wasn't quite sure if she had said 4 or not, but she did. It was 4. I showed you the pictures of the 2 people in a recent video. And here's another picture because one of the people that were baptized, this is from Grace in Las Vegas. One of her people that got baptized, Susan, right here, she is now actually going to the temple for the first time to do baptisms for the dead. She's doing work for her ancestors, and she's like the last of her line, according to Grace. So like everyone in her family is passed on. She doesn't have any children, and she's doing work for everybody that she can, which is so amazing that something like this can happen so quickly, and someone can just like make so much progress so fast, and it's amazing to see. And I guess they had found out that Susan here and Grace, the person that gave her the Book of Mormon, they're actually related a few generations back. And then there was somebody at the temple that was also related to Susan. So it's really funny how the Lord works. But congratulations, Susan. And I'm sure you're enjoying the lovely Las Vegas temple. It's one of my favorites. So that is just amazing. Okay, so let's go ahead and hop into this. It has a title called "When Will the Son of Man Come?" Okay, so this is with Bruce R. McConkie. And it'll show you the parts where Bruce R. McConkie is talking and otherwise. So at the start here, I think this is just like the professor or whoever it is. Okay, there's one major subject that we will have an opportunity to say something about. It's the one I have written on the board. Jesus as Christ cometh again. This is the one instance, maybe in a way it's the single instance, where we have knowledge of a sermon Jesus preached that is on one subject. Now we have the Sermon on the Mount, and we've had a few minor things, but all else we've had have been sermons that have gone from one subject to another without any attempt whatever to give a coherent picture of a single doctrinal matter. He comes the nearest, I think, in this sermon of any sermon that he preaches to outline a single cohesive, rounded picture of a subject. Yet in this instance, he is still not developing a subject the way we ordinarily would, but he is giving a series of successive events that are destined to transpire before or incident to his second coming. To cover the matter, we really would have to spend 8 or 10 days on it to analyze it. So let's do this morning. Let's just rather arbitrarily pick out a portion of the sermon and use it as an occasion to draw together a perspective and a view of the second coming that we ought to have. Then we'll do precisely the same thing over again tomorrow with a different portion of the subject. Now, running down these page numbers, the first heading is Second Coming and Reward. The next is the apostles that are to judge Israel. Next, the destruction of the Jewish temple, 637. The ancient saints persecuted, 641. Is the abomination of desolation that was to sweep Jerusalem in the days of Jesus shortly thereafter. Then apostasy and false Christs, the gathering of Israel, the restoration of the gospel, desolations again, the subject of the Gentile fullness, the abomination of the desolation that was to sweep Jerusalem in the last days, his return, the parable of the fig tree, and now we're down to this heading, which is, when will the Son of Man come? Let's have a little discussion about this heading that's listed in the text. Let's read the original Matthew account first, shall we? Matthew 24:36. He does verses 36 to 39. But of the day and hour no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. Oh, sorry. But of the day and hour knoweth no man, no, the angels of heaven, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the day of Noah were, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So also the coming of the Son of Man be. And by the way, I want to comment on this. This is another scripture that I feel gives substance to the idea that things are not going to be super evident when the second coming happens. So say, for example, in this case, we're talking about the destruction. So, uh, the destruction of the flood, there's also going to be a mass destruction at the second coming, namely the earth's baptism of fire, which is going to be a literal fire that's going to burn the wicked off the earth. So if things are going to be the same as it was back then, I don't think you can have super obvious things happening that would alert a lot of people and rob them of their faith. There's people in the church that have ideas of just like really big, grand things that are going to take place. But the problem that I have with those is, number one, those things aren't plainly taught by anyone that I can find. Except for in the case of the 10 lost tribes, but that's in the earlier church that you find quotes about them. But in more recent times, no. I'm talking about being a main group and coming in a marvelous way. But when it comes to like the last video I did about the final war, um, I feel like that's something that would be super duper obvious unless there was just like no time to really act. Like if it flared up within a week or a couple weeks or a month or something like that, then maybe that would take people by surprise. But I think that's an important concept, is that things can happen very quickly, and I think that they're designed to happen very quickly, so that you'll be living however you're living now all the way up until the time that it comes, because it's a test. So anyway, let's continue. Okay, well, we're going to start out now with the proposition that no man knows the day and the hour of his return. Then we'll see what we can do to pin down, or at least give us some intelligent appreciation as to the time when he will come. You ask somebody when Christ will come, and if they have some working knowledge of the subject, immediately they react, no man knows the day or the hour. This sort of gives the impression to people that he will come at a totally unknown time, which isn't quite the fact. we have a pretty good, definite idea that that's what I thought we would talk about primarily today. Let's take that particular heading and see how much we can pin down. Let's take a text that Paul wrote, 1 Thessalonians. The events that we're going to list are the conditions preceding his second coming. Look down in the end of the 4th chapter and pick up the context. The 14th verse of the 4th chapter. Jesus rose. The 15th verse, the coming of the Lord. The 16th, the Lord himself shall descend from heaven. So now we are in a context of the second coming. We start at the 5th chapter. But of the times and the seasons, brethren, ye have no need that I write unto you. Verse 2. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say, peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that the day should overtake you as a thief. Ye are all the children of light, and the children of the day. We are not of the night, nor of darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep as do others, but let us watch and be sober. See, and here's another thing that kind of goes against the narrative of like just crazy, wild things happening that are really obvious at the second coming. Uh, how is it that this scripture would be fulfilled, that they're going to say peace and safety, if you have massive raging wars, like a third world war, United States is being invaded, and it's been going on for a while. I don't think anyone's going to be saying peace and safety at that point, because there's going to be massive tribulation. Now, we've been seeing tribulation. We've had 2 world wars. We've had a Cold War. We've had a bunch of proxy wars. We've had all sorts of wars and strife and things that have been going on. And uh, that's been kind of a thing going on since the beginning of this dispensation, but more especially since the American Civil War. But there's a picture that's being painted by some that things are just going to be insane and crazy, and it's not going to be peace and safety when Christ comes. But according to Paul, it is. People are going to say peace and safety, and they're going to be living their lives, marrying and eating and drinking and doing the stuff that they do now. And then all of a sudden it's going to be too late, and it's going to be as a thief. It's going to be as a thief. So anyway, let's continue. Now, I think that's ideal. I don't know how Paul or anyone conceivably could have chosen a better way to illustrate what is involved. There are 2 principles. One of them says, we don't know the day or the hour. He's going to come as a thief in the night, which means purely and simply that he's going to come unexpectedly without warning, with the householder having pun up the guard to watch his treasure and so on. It's a very clear thing that we don't know the day or the hour, but here's another phrase he uses: the times and the seasons. We don't know the day or the hour, but we're supposed to know the times and the seasons, and the illustration is a pregnant woman. Now, someone is going to have a child, and the time is approaching for the delivery. Well, nobody knows the hour or the minute when the child will be born. You don't pin it down specifically and exactly, but every informed person who is acquainted with what's involved with childbearing can tell the approximate time of the birth. So the doctor knows when it will be, and he gets the woman to the hospital for delivery and so on. They pin it down, if they can, to a day or within a day or 2. Then as the time approaches, the signs begin to show up, and they make the arrangements to get her to a hospital. Well, this is just a perfect illustration of what's involved in the coming of Christ. We don't know the hour and the minute of the birth, but we know within a day or so when it's going to be. So we don't know the day or the hour of Christ coming, but we do know the times and the seasons. Or as President Wilford Woodruff said in a sermon, we know the generation of his return. And lately, some people have been thrown off by what what President Eyring said this last conference. I've already addressed that, so just go back a few videos. And also, in particular, you guys, if you're worried about generations, actually, I have an entire playlist that has to do with generations. Okay, because we've been studying this topic pretty thoroughly. On this playlist, I have 16 videos discussing generations that have been talked about. Not only that, but I have my spreadsheet where I have a collection of all the generational statements that I'm aware of. And some of them, especially the more recent ones, are they're pretty spot on. Okay, they're pretty telling. That where for example, President Nelson, when he was president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, he told the millennials in no uncertain terms that they are like millennial really does apply to them because they're going to be in the millennium, for example. But you can go through this or just watch my videos. Just binge this whole playlist. I'll put it in the description below. It's pretty clear that we are at that time. Especially, again, I'm just going to remind you about Joseph Smith's statement about generations and the rising generation, that at his time, there was, he says right here, were I going to prophesy, I would say the end of the world would not come in 1844, 5, or 6, or in 40 years. There are those of the rising generation who shall not taste death till Christ comes. And we did the whole thing, and we also took into account Elder McConkie's guidance on this statement because he talks about this in Millennial Messiah. And a man, especially a polygamous man, who, because there were men that would have children all the way into their 70s and 80s in one case, and we explored that. And so someone that had a child at that time, okay, because uh, Elder McConkie said it would include those that are then born at the time of Joseph Smith and then the next couple generations after that. And you could just watch the video. But basically, President Nelson's generation is that generation. Okay? So anyway, this video is not about all that, but don't get discouraged by what you think President Eyring said in the last conference. I've already gone over that. He made a similar statement in the Sisters of Zion talk in April or October 2020. All right, let's continue. Now, I think maybe it would give us a profitable perspective and view of what's involved if we just make ourselves a list of things that are going to precede the second coming of Christ. As we make this list, then with propriety, we can ask ourselves who it is in the world of all religious groups that has any substantial or real knowledge of what's involved in these respective events. We come up with precisely the conclusion that Paul reached here, that we're the children of light and we're not supposed to be in darkness, since nobody else really knows what's involved in the second coming. Well, these conditions proceed. The first one is 1, 2, unaudible, unfold. Okay, so this must have been taken from like a recording and then somebody transcribed it. Now, Paul's written this letter to the Thessalonians, and they've gained the impression from what he said that Jesus was going to come in their day. They apparently misunderstood, or he didn't do as good a job as he might have done of unfolding the problem. So he writes them a second letter. Look over at the second chapter now, or 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, where he takes up his subject again. It is that, quote, the Lord Jesus, verse 7, shall be revealed from heaven with his mighty angels in flaming fire. So we're back where we were. Now, the second chapter. Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our gathering together unto him, that ye be not soon shaken in mind, or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word. Here he's back to his epistle, nor by letter, as from us, as the day of Christ is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except, here we get the first condition precedent to the second coming, universal apostasy. There be a falling away first, that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. What this means is that there's going to be a universal apostasy sometime between the first coming and the second coming of Christ. Now here's a little difficult phrase that's confusing. It says, and that man of sin be revealed. What is it? Who is the man of sin? Comment, Satan. Bruce R. McConkie, what makes you think that? Okay, so maybe this first part here is Bruce R. McConkie talking, and then you have a comment from a student who answers Satan, that Satan is the man of sin. And we've already done a whole playlist on the Antichrist, and there's no church doctrine whatsoever anywhere that you can find that teaches that there's a one-person Antichrist. but that the man of sin being referred to here is Satan himself. So Bruce R. McConkie, what makes you think that? Student, answer, inaudible. It seems to me that he is identifying the foundation of the great and abominable church. Bruce R. McConkie, well, he really is. Ordinarily, if you say to somebody the man of sin, they will pop right back, oh, it's the Pope. Well, really, it isn't the Pope. This is the way the Lord or the apostles use some language to get a great concept over. Comment, it sounds to me like for that to happen, knowledge would have to be restored or revealed, which would sound to me like a restoration. Bruce R. McConkie. Knowledge would have to be revealed as to who this man is. Well, there are two ways of taking that language, which says the man of sin will be revealed. First, let's define it. It's the devil. There's no question about that. The Lord does this sort of thing. He calls himself man of holiness to symbolize that all holiness and perfection are resident in him. That is his name. Well, if you figure out a perfect name for Lucifer, you really couldn't do better than man of sin, because he's symbolic of everything that is evil and wicked. So in this day of universal apostasy, the man of sin is going to be revealed in that the things that transpire are his workings, and those workings that occur in and of themselves reveal Satan to be the spiritual mind. Now, you guys, there's a whole bunch of people that are teaching this idea that there's a one-person antichrist, like just a mortal, but a great antichrist that has to appear before the second coming. And again, based on everything that I've researched, I'll just do it again. Based on authorized, authoritative comments, okay, that is not true. It is not true. Some Latter-day Saints get caught up in this idea because they look to evangelicals and their interpretation of scriptures, which they have no concept, or they don't read the scriptures the same way that we do when it comes to the great apostasy. For them, that's not in the scriptures, the great apostasy. So they take those scriptures in literal terms and think that there's going to be a prophesied one-person man that has to appear, and that's not the case. That's not the case. And some of the most explicit statements that I've heard that clarify this, I would recommend this video right here, The False Prophet According to the True Prophet, where President Oaks spoke about it, and then Harold B. Lee. It was also in the Millennial Star, which was published back in the early days of the church, where that just really, really explicitly says that that the Antichrist that people think are going to have, it's an organization. It's the great and abominable church, and at the head of it is Satan. It's as simple as that. That's all that it is. So anyone that's teaching something different, they're going off of their own opinion or their own interpretation, the way that they read the scripture and the way that they think it is supposed to be interpreted. But it's not true, and it's not substantiated at all, not one bit, by anything that's taught by the church. Not at all. Okay, so yeah, reveals Satan to be the spiritual mind. Now, that's one way of stating this, but it's a little different from what you said. What you said is there would have to be revelation to tell who he was. That's also correct. That's because that's also correct because that's what happened at one of the early conferences in the church. After the conference, the prophet wrote in his journal that at this conference the man of sin was revealed, meaning that it was manifest to him who he was, that he was Lucifer. This is just a perfect title for the devil. He is the man of sin. He's symbolic of all rebellion and all sin that he's revealed through the apostasy, through the workings that go on in the world during that period. Lauren, question. Would you... Well, okay, first, I'm going to have to take note of this because I need to find that. After the conference, the prophet, which I'm assuming he's referring to Joseph Smith, wrote in his journal that the man of sin was revealed. So that's like the most authoritative thing that you can find. If you're going off on this idea that there's going to be a one-person antichrist, and that's fine, you can think and believe what you want, but The proper way to do this is to look to the prophet and those that can authoritatively say and interpret scripture. That's what keeps us together as a church, as we have the same beliefs and the same doctrine. So I'm going to have to find that. I don't know if the Joseph Smith papers contain like Joseph Smith's. I'm going to find it. I'm going to find it. And then I'll make another video for the Antichrist playlist. Okay, so Lauren's question. Would you comment on what is meant by the temple of God? Bruce R. McConkie. Well, this is symbolic too, isn't it? He makes himself the chief religionist and people worship him. See, because this is one of the things that people point to. They're like, well, the Antichrist is going to sit in the temple and then purport to be God, make himself seem as though he is God. Well, Bruce R. McConkie, well, this is symbolic too, isn't it? He makes himself the chief religionist and people worship him. People are following his church, and it's the foundation of the great and abominable church. And it was as though he were saying to people, look, come worship me. I'm sitting in the temple. It's not literally in the temple of God, but he's setting himself up as preeminent in the religious field. It's as though he were saying, come to the temple of God, come to the Vatican, come to the Riverside Baptist Church, come wherever the doctrines are taught that are contrary to salvation. Well, without amplifying that particular one, there is no question in Latter-day Saints' minds that there's been a universal apostasy. So that condition preceding the second coming of Christ is behind us. Let's take it a little rapidly so you'll get the whole list before us. So, I mean, man, there it is right there. It's like, it's so... I know that it's not as exciting, and I think that's what trips some people up. They want to view the future as just like super exciting and like an adventure, whatever the case may be. They like the guesswork. They like guessing and like looking at different possibilities. Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Joe Biden, uh, Barack Obama, like all these different people. Oh, maybe this is the Antichrist because look what they're doing with this. Oh no, look what he's doing with microchips. Oh no, look what he's doing with artificial intelligence. Oh no, look what he's doing with healthcare. Look what he's doing with, just like endless and endless and endless and endless and endless things. And that's fine. And I know it's not as exciting to just be, oh, this is the great and abominable church. This is the great Antichrist power, is just the fallen religions of today. It's not as exciting as thinking about how you have to survive when the Antichrist comes, and like how you're all prepared for when that happens and how you're going to resist, you know. Okay, Acts 3. Now we won't analyze this passage. Some of you were present when we analyzed it in the other class. Out of it for our purposes this morning, we'll just call attention to what's involved. This is Peter's discussion where he invites the murderers of the Lord, those guilty in essence of his blood, to believe his message and hope that maybe there's some blessing for them in a day of inaudible, when the earth becomes millennial and is renewed and becomes a new heaven and a new earth. He says that your sins may be blotted out when these events occur, when the Lord sends Christ again, when there is a new heaven and a new earth, when he shall send Jesus Christ, which before was preached unto you, whom the heaven must receive until... We're back to this same concept again, that there's a condition precedent. Christ came once and he'll come again in the day of refreshing, the millennial period, but the heaven must receive him until something takes place. It's here described as the times of restitution of all things that God has spoken by the mouths of all of his holy prophets, and translated from the King James language into modern language, says age of restoration. Write it in the margins of your Bible if you want. So this is saying Christ cannot come until an age of restoration commences. This universal apostasy started, for all practical purposes, shortly after the death of the apostles, after the keys were gone. And it was complete before very long. This age of restoration commenced obviously in the spring of 1820 with the appearance of the Father and the Son to Joseph Smith. So, ye brethren need not be in darkness, you're the children of light. We again perceive that the saints of God know what is going to transpire before the second coming of Christ. Well, number 3, there's not even, let's not even take time to read it. You all know it by heart. It's in Revelation, the coming of Moroni, that an angel will bring fulfillment of the gospel, and incidentally, others are woven into the passage. If you want to analyze that particular passage, Revelation 14:6-7, and do it phrase by phrase, you'll discover that it's a passage that teaches a universal apostasy as well as restoration, because an angel is going to bring the fullness of the gospel, and it's going to be preached to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. And by the way, you guys, if you look at the scripture citation index, because what I did one time is I came here, this is put out by BYU. On the right side, here's all the scriptures, and you can search every single scripture and see if it's been cited in General Conference or other places like the Journal of Discourses and the Joseph Smith, the scriptural teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith. So you go to the book of Revelation, and under each book or under each chapter, you see this little bracket with a number inside. This is the number of citations for each chapter. Okay, so the one that we're reading right here, Revelation 14:6-7, you can see that it's Revelation chapter 14 that's been cited the most out of the entire book of Revelation. And this should tell you something, because if you're viewing this as like a very chronological thing, because there's people that want to get into the chronology of the book of Revelation and be like, oh well, this hasn't happened yet, we can't possibly be there because da da da. Well, this has been cited so many times. All those citations for chapter 14 are citing either verse 6 by itself. Okay, in fact, I'm going to pull it up. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people, saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. So, let's go. Dang it. Anyway, just the point that I'm trying to make here is that, click on that without clicking stop, is that this has been cited so many times because it has to do with the restoration. So I just thought about that, and that's something to think about if you're trying to put everything in order to figure out where we're at. I think that's a kind of a futile effort, because not everything is strictly chronological in the book of Revelation. Some of it is, but even when it is, okay, I'm not going to get into that. Okay, so if anyone had it already, that wouldn't be necessary. Talking about if they already had that message, if they already had the gospel, there wouldn't need for it to be preached, right? Therefore, that's talking about a restoration. So, okay, continuing. It ends up announcing that will take place just before the hour of his judgment is set. So, here we have an announcement that just before the second coming of Christ, the judgment will be the gospel will be restored. Well, the gospel has been restored, and the period of restoration would have been from about 1820 to about 1836, meaning the time as far as we know it, when the keys were finally given. Moses and Elijah and Elias came on the 3rd of April, 1836. Along through that period, we receive all the keys that were needed. If any keys came later than 1836, we don't know what they were. Well, that's an interesting little, I don't know if he's trying to give like a hint there that maybe more keys have been received and the general membership of the church doesn't know about it. But anyway, but in any event, in some period there, the gospel was restored. Now, that's not an issue with us. That's no problem. And I think it's interesting to note how we commemorated the 200 years since the first vision in 1820. I think that we're in a completely new phase, and I know a lot of you do too, since April 2020 because of that general conference. And my 1823 video that I keep talking about, which I'll do soon, it has to do with this concept too. What happened in 1823. Anyway, the next one is the statement in Matthew 24:14. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. Okay. Now, these highlights, like this yellow highlight that you see, I did not do this. This is part of the PDF itself, the way it was saved. So somebody else highlighted it. Okay, the gospel witnesses, it does not say to all people, it says to all nations, and then shall the end come. Okay, well, there you go. And this is something I've got to do like a separate video about this because this one comes up all the time. It drives me nuts. People that are always trying to. I think there's some people that genuinely believe that it has to go to all people, but I think that there's this kind of like attitude with some where they don't want the second coming to happen in their lifetime. They're afraid of it. Maybe for whatever reason, maybe for themselves, maybe for those they love, I don't know, but they're afraid of it. They don't want it to happen, or maybe they have like a really good thing going on in their life. We've talked about this numerous times on the channel, just like the different reasons why people seem to want to push it off into the future, and I think that's like a really sad thing. Now, if you're doing it genuinely, pure of heart, genuinely, then you're just, going according to what you actually believe, and there's no problem with that. But if you have one of these other things going on, that's probably not the best thing. If it's because you're scared, or if it's because, maybe you have some kind of like grand timeline that you've spent so much time on, and you need for it to be right to validate, just how well you put it together. That could be another problem, is that you have a theory, and so the theory has to be right to validate you. I don't know. But this is one that comes up from time to time that, well, it can't happen soon because the gospel hasn't gone to all the world. And that's where I have to ask, like, who are you, or who am I, or anybody to say that it hasn't gone to all the world? Especially at a time when we have the internet that crosses borders, and you have people uh, easily traveling to other countries. We've talked about refugees and immigration, and how that's brought people out of a place where they can't receive the gospel to a place where they can. Just think about everyone that's gone from the Middle East to Europe or America, Australia, places like that, right? We've talked about that at length. There's been a lot of people from Afghanistan, Syria, and other places too. It's always happening. There's always people moving to other countries. And then on top of that, we have the internet, which the internet is like one of the most amazing things. It really is. And for all intents and purposes, it's been around maybe, uh, I don't know. I'm not going to like its very first inception as what was it called, DARPANET or whatever, or ARPANET. I'm not sure. Um, but like since it became like a household type thing, I think that kind of started around the 90s because my dad was an early adopter of the internet because he was a software engineer. Um, but so let's say maybe like 30 years, and it just keeps like spreading. More and more people are getting connected to the internet. You don't think that they've come across the church on the internet? In what in your mind defines if they've had the gospel preached to them? Does it have to be a missionary? Or can it be that they stumble across the church website, or they stumble across something that would give them the opportunity um, to have their interest piqued, or to have the Spirit testify to them, hey, investigate this a little bit more. So how can you define when someone has been preached the gospel? Only God knows truly when someone has actually had their chance to receive the gospel. And if it was because they saw a meme on Facebook and it touched their heart, then there you go. They were preached the gospel through a meme. So anyway, but Bruce R. McConkie right here is saying the gospel witnesses, okay, the gospel witnesses, it does not say to all people. It says to all nations, and then shall the end come. So immediately you have the problem, uh, what gospel is involved? Well, it's got to be the restored gospel because the restored gospel is the same gospel that they had. So we begin to identify the gospel by saying it had the same authority and the same officers, the same doctrines, and so on that it had in the meridian of time. You, sorry, you identify the gospel. Then the problem is it going to all nations? Well, has it been to all nations? You see, these first three are fulfilled. Has this one been fulfilled? I don't know whether this has been fulfilled or not. Okay, you see okay, I'm trying to make sense of what he just said. You see, these first three are all fulfilled. What is he talking about? Is he just talking about in this gospel the kingdom shall be preached to all the world for a witness to all nations? Okay. So begin to identify. Okay, whatever. I'm sure that he'll probably clarify. Question is asked, but it's inaudible. Bruce R. McConkie says, "Yes, there's no surprise anyone. Yes, there's no. Okay, yes, there's no promise anyone is going to receive it. That's different. This condition proceeding essentially says it's going to be preached in all nations. No promise that they're going to be converted. Another part of that. Okay, another part of it is that it's going to be preached to all people. There's no promise that all people are going to hear the gospel that I know about before the second coming, but all but all but that all nations. Has it been preached in all nations? Answer. Uh, with our world broadcast system, it has. Bruce R. McConkie, it has surely in that way. Look at that. And this is, I don't know when this is, but I mean, Bruce R. McConkie, what was his, when did he pass away? Probably in like the 80s or something. Bruce R. I'm going to look it up. Bruce R. McConkie, 85. So April 19th, 85. So the internet was not yet really in households by that time. So with the technology of 1985, he's saying that yes, it has. And so you have to wonder and think how much more has the gospel gone to all the world because of the internet? Okay, Bruce R. McConkie. It has surely in that way. Maybe we could expect the Lord to be a little more specific than that even. Maybe he would do more for a nation than just let it be said in English from here for the benefit of Russians who don't speak English. In any event, if it hasn't transpired already, we could do it between now and October conference, couldn't we? Not quite, not really. We could do it in a very short period of time with the facilities that are at our command, so that it would be no problem. We would have to try some other languages. We send out the conference now in about 5 languages. In the same moment that it's being said in English, it's being said in German, Portuguese, French, Spanish, and what else? We can get the message over without too much trouble. Either that has been fulfilled or it could be fulfilled in a very short period of time. And I would say if Bruce R. McConkie was here now with the way that he's talking right here, he would say that surely it has because, okay, how many languages Book of Mormon? The Book of Mormon is now published in more than 80 languages with selections available in another 25 languages. So that's 80 plus, so that'd be like, if you add that together, okay, that'd be 105. But this is saying 115. This is 2022. Let's open this up. Western Hemisphere, and then it has a map to go along with it. Look at that. I mean, it's basically at this point, it's available everywhere, you know? And I'm sure since this time, this was put out February of last year, 2022. I'm sure that even more progress has been made since that time. Um, how many languages is General Conference translated into? 31 languages, according to this. Okay, wait, hold on. Okay. Portions of General Conference are interpreted into 93 different languages. 43 languages are interpreted in the conference center and broadcast via satellite. And look, you have like really obscure languages like Apache. I've never even heard of this. Hmong. Where's that spoken? Chukis, Sinhala, Thai, Telugu, Tamil, Yapese. I've never heard of Yapese in my life. So since let's just say that he was giving this class in '85. I mean, since that time, things have really skyrocketed in terms of communication and languages, both with the Book of Mormon and General Conference being interpreted into different languages. So it is marching right along. And let's see, pie chart of world languages. Let's look at this. Okay, that's cool. Now, you don't think that these main languages here have already been you don't think that these big languages here, English, Chinese, Hindi, Russian, you don't think that these languages are being interpreted in General Conference or don't have the Book of Mormon in their language? Let's see. Let's look at. Oh, we just read Tamil, didn't we? Let's see. Tamil. Yeah, right there. Look, there's Tamil. What about Urdu? I think that's in Pakistan. Yep, there it is. Urdu. Okay, what about Javanese? Javanese. Not Javanese. But you have to remember, some of these other countries, like if it's a third world country, there's a lot of times that you'll have multiple languages spoken in that country. So, for example, let's look at Africa, just because off the top of my head, I have knowledge about Ghana and Nigeria because there are a lot of them on my mission. So, in Nigeria and Ghana, you have a whole bunch of different languages that are spoken, like tribal languages. But at the same time, they have a what's it called? Like a lingua franca, which is English. So they all under. I didn't have to learn any Nigerian languages or Ghanaian languages in order to teach them in Spain. And by the way, I was teaching them in Spain, as well as people from all over Africa. By the way, that have gone to Europe to work. They speak English, and every day English is becoming more and more spoken all around the world. So these are all a lot of like things that you can't possibly look into. Like no one really can, because you'd have to have all the data from every single person, everywhere that they've traveled, all the languages that they know. And I would say it's pretty safe to say that the gospel being preached throughout all the world is probably been completed or to the satisfactory of the Lord. Um, okay. And keep in mind right here, some people will say, oh, no, every single person, because that's the way that they read the scripture, because they think in very like black and white terms. Like everything is like just you read it literally. It has to be literal. There's no nuance to what's being said. And that's not how it looks like it's being interpreted here. Okay. Question: what are we trying to accomplish? We know they have these radio systems. Do they feel they need to have it in all languages? Bruce R. McConkie. Eventually, it's got to go in all languages. We have a revelation in the Doctrine and Covenants that says every people will hear the gospel in their languages and in their own tongue. We do that to an extent now through our missionaries, don't we? I don't know where that is, maybe about section 91. We'll do that on the air. We'll do it by missionaries. I don't know how long it would take, but it wouldn't be difficult. In a way, the gospel has been heralded to all the world in the days of the Smoot investigation because all the papers in the world carried the stories that we believe. So look at that. It doesn't even have to be necessarily by us ourselves. And I'm pretty sure you could find information about the church in any given language, even if we don't have it officially translated. Um, okay, there are a lot of things which put the message over in addition to the witness and testimony of the elders standing personally on somebody's doorstep. But what I think this means is we'll get a general proclamation in all nations, which means an appreciable portion of the people will be consciously aware they've heard a message about a restored gospel. And that makes all the sense in the world to me. It really does. Okay, question. Are there any conversations that have come through our broadcasting programs? Bruce R. McConkie, I assume that there are. I don't know how you tie these things down. Florence Smith said to me last week, we've had our first baptism that we know of now from the Promised Valley, quote unquote. Well, it's hard to tie it down, but somebody went to Promised Valley, heard of the church for the first time, and now they're baptized. Other things would be woven in too, so it's difficult to tell. Well, I suggest this as a thing that has to happen before the second coming. The coming forth of the Book of Mormon, I think this is just categorically taught in the Revelations, but you have to have a little understanding of the overall to get the message that it is so. You have to know those first four to begin with, and you have to be aware that the gospel is going to be restored in particular. Then in that setting, you read Isaiah 29 and Ezekiel 37 about the coming forth of the book. You tie it into the restoration of the gospel to Moroni bringing the fullness and the book, and you end up making a very good case that we have in the Revelation. The announcement of the Book of Mormon will precede the second coming of Christ. Mormon 8 is also a passage on that. Now, this one is plainer and easier to understand than that. Before the second coming of Christ, something is going to occur that is called the restoration of the kingdom of Israel, uh, where they said, "Will thou at this time restore the kingdom again to Israel?" And he said, in substance, no, but at a time subsequent to New Testament times, this will occur. Well, the restoration of the kingdom of Israel is ecclesiastical, and that has taken place. We have the kingdom. The restoration of the kingdom of Israel is political, and that will take place incident to his coming. The ecclesiastical kingdom is the church. The political kingdom will be when he reigns personally on earth in fulfillment of the statements, "Ye shall have no law but my law when I come," in that he will make a full end of all nations. That one you could easily develop. Here are two more. One of them is the coming of Elijah, and the other one is sending of a messenger before the Lord. All right, these two we are familiar with to a degree. We know Malachi's statement. It's that familiar to us. We know, "Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day," for Malachi 4, verse 5. The great and dreadful day is the second coming. April 3rd, 1836 is now a fulfillment, isn't it? Elijah came. This messenger is a little more difficult, and we're not quite as familiar with the fact that a messenger is to come before the Lord's face. It's a little harder the way it's laid out in the book, but open to the book of Malachi and note the verses that are involved, and you can analyze them a little more when you have time. Malachi 3:1. "Behold, I will send my messenger, and he will prepare the way before me." In a sense, it's a little unfortunate, but also it's true. So maybe it's not unfortunate that this is quoted with reference to the first coming, but it has particular reference to the second. And the Lord whom ye seek shall suddenly come to his temple, even to the messenger of the covenant, whom ye delight in. Behold, he shall come, saith the Lord of hosts. The first verse talks about two different things, and you analyze it a little and figure it out. One is that there will be a messenger before his face, and the other is that he himself shall come. When it gets down into the second verse, it's carrying on that second thought, which is that he himself shall come a second time, but who may abide the day of his coming? I will send my messenger. Who is the messenger? Is this one that's been fulfilled? Student answer, it must be Joseph Smith. Bruce R. McConkie, you would sort of instinctively think that, wouldn't you? Because he's the great prophet of the restoration. I think that would be true. Look in section 45 and get a little of the perspective that he uses. Section 45:9, I will send my messenger, and even so, this in 1831, I have sent mine everlasting covenant into the world, to be a light to the world, and to be a standard for my people, and for the Gentiles to seek to it, and to be a messenger before my face, to prepare the way before me. Who is the messenger? In a manner of speaking, the messenger is the gospel, which is the everlasting covenant. But on the other hand, we personalize things, don't we? Who brought the gospel for all practical purposes? Joseph Smith. So I think it's wholly within the bounds of propriety to conclude that the messenger was Joseph Smith, in that the message he brought was the gospel. You can't have a messenger without a message. This is what the early brethren would have been saying. If you find Orson Pratt and various of them saying that Joseph Smith was the messenger who came before the face of the Lord, although the Revelation says specifically that the messenger is the gospel. The way we use words, we would say the gospel was the message and Joseph Smith was the messenger. Maybe there's something more than this, I don't know, but this is pretty good. But this is a pretty good listing, and it's ample at least, if not to wholly cover the subject, to get the view that it is involved in what Paul said. Ye brethren need not be in darkness, ye are the children of light. The woman is pregnant. You're going to know the hour in the afternoon when the child will be born, but you don't know the day. You do know the times and the seasons. There's a list of 8 things. Question, inaudible. Bruce R. McConkie. Yes, you could add that. I deliberately left that out because it's indefinite, but let's put it out. Let's put it in this outline. World conditions. You don't pin that down quite as much. You've opened up a whole new field of inquiry. Wars and world conditions, and also such things as earthquakes, the physical things that are happening on the earth in greater quantity that have hitherto happened. You can pin that down reasonably, I think. You end up with the concept that here are the events that nobody knows but us, and that they have been fulfilled. Now, we're not supposed to be in darkness. Question. Would you put in number 5 the coming forth of the sealed portion of the Book of Mormon? Bruce R. McConkie. Actually, I don't. I don't know when the sealed portion of the Book of Mormon is going to come forth. This is just pure speculation on my part, but it's difficult to conceive that it will come forth before the millennium. You see, you read this business of how people have to live in order to be qualified to receive the sealed portion. They have to have the faith that the brother of Jared had, and so on. Then you read that when the Lord comes, he will reveal all things, and you just begin to think about sorry, and you just begin to think it would be pretty difficult to suppose that the sealed portion would come forth before the people are as righteous as they will be during the millennial era. I don't know. I think all it has to be to fulfill this requirement is that we have the book the way we have it now. Brother Turner, question, inaudible. Restoration of the 10 tribes. Isn't that supposed to precede his second coming? Bruce R. McConkie, I don't know. I can't figure that out. Question, inaudible. Were it given if not, sorry, were given if it were not to be used. Okay, now by the way, at this point, Bruce R. McConkie may not have figured it out. but he definitely figured it out later when, let's see, when this is what he said. This is my collection of all the quotes that have to do with the 10 lost tribes. I'll just read the shorter one of the two because this one, he actually talks quite a bit about it in Millennial Messiah. But let me just read this shorter one. This is actually the most recent one. This is in 1985. So, well, at least when the book was published. This is from A New Witness for the Articles of Faith, page 520. And you'll have to excuse my citation right there. I'm trying to get everything moved over to the Chicago Manual of Style type of citations, but that's not how I started out the channel, but it's just going to take me time to correct it all. Okay, so this is Bruce R. McConkie. There's something mysterious and fascinating about believing the 10 tribes are behind an iceberg somewhere in the land of the north, or that they are on some distant planet that will one day join itself with the earth, or that the tribe of Dan is in Denmark, the tribe of Reuben in Russia, and so forth. A common cliche asserts, if we knew where the lost tribes were, they would not be lost. True it is that they are lost from the knowledge of the world. They are not lost. Sorry, they are not seen and recognized as the kingdom they once were. But in general terms, their whereabouts is known. They are scattered in all the nations of the earth, primarily in the nations north of the lands of their first inheritance. Okay, but he says so much more than that, and it's not just him. There's other general authorities uh, that quote scripture that's commonly used to prove the existence of a main group of the 10 lost tribes. But then, for example, LeGrand Richards interprets that scripture a completely different way than what some of these authors nowadays and other people do. And there's others too: Brad Wilcox, Ruben V. Aliad, D. Todd Christofferson, President Nelson. Just there's a bunch. Okay, Bruce R. McConkie. I think they're going to be used. The only issue is okay. I think they're going to be used. The only issue is when are they going to be used? I have to find this. Maybe some of you know of its existence and I can't find it. I said to President Joseph Fielding Smith, I'm beginning to think that the 10 tribes aren't going to come back until after Christ comes. He said to me, well, you are in good company. You are in good company. That's what President John Taylor taught. Now, I have to find what he taught. Apparently he announced that some way. If section 133 is chronological, it's difficult to know if it is, then that would be true because the way the Revelation recites the 10 tribes are coming back after the second coming. In that connection, if you read the passages that a highway will be cast up on which they will come back, meaning the continents will come together for their use, the inference would be after the second coming. I'm just uncertain in my mind whether we can pin that down. And by the way, Bruce R. McConkie talked about that highway because people read that as like a literal highway rather than later on. He obviously changed his mind because he talked about it in the same way that Isaiah talks about it, that it's a path of holiness, or in other words, it's a covenant path. So you have Israel scattered throughout the world, but primarily in the north countries that are coming back to their home on the covenant path. Okay, question. What about the 144,000? Aren't they supposed to be from the tribes returning? Bruce R. McConkie, I don't know. But that will occur at the moment of his coming. If you divide this into two headings, you would say conditions precedent and conditions concurrent. You list the events that are occurring on Earth so close and approximate to his coming that they are actually involved in it. Now, these high priests, as you mentioned, are going to stand on Mount Zion, or in this case, the way that it reads is Mr. Zion, are going to stand on Mr. Zion with him when he comes. So that's almost concurrent. What people don't generally visualize about the conditions concurrent, I have this pointed out now in the references in the text, is that there are going to be wars and desolations going on at the time of his coming. There is one of the sweetest little heresies you will ever find. People in the church are everlastingly saying, "Oh, if people would only repent and live better, we'd bring to pass the millennium. If we would just improve ourselves, we'd get to the point where the millennium would be ushered in." This is pure nonsense. There isn't any scripture that intimates this in any way. When all these scriptures talk about conditions concurrent, they're talking about the desolations, the wars, the carnage, the bloodshed, the wickedness, and the fact that the earth is going to get more wicked until the Lord has to come and destroy it by fire. When Jesus comes, he's going to come in the midst of the greatest war that has ever been on earth. Well, okay, so that goes against my idea that um but we've talked a lot about this war. So anyway, I don't know. Here he says it's going to be the greatest war that's ever been on Earth. So maybe it will be super obvious, or maybe it'll just take place really quick. Um, remember, I did a video about World War III. Are we in World War III now? And is war the same as it used to be? Like, of course, conventional war is never going to go away, but there's all sorts of other war that's going on. There's psychological operations that go on against countries to bring about revolution and stuff like that. We've talked about the whole rash of revolutions since 2001, namely the Arab Spring, but it's essentially the idea that you can weaponize things like social media, and I'm sure there's other assets that they use, but they've like figured out a way to instigate revolutions instead of invading a country. You simply help the people do it themselves and change whatever needs to be changed. So, I don't know. We'll just have to see what exactly happens. But let's continue on. The exact hour is when the revelation is fulfilled that says, "I will gather all nations together against Jerusalem." The whole world will be at war. Jerusalem will be the focal point where the battles take place. This is Armageddon. This is the name of the plain Estrelon, or whatever it is outside Jerusalem, where the war and conflict will be centered at the hour of the second coming. Well, the second coming is fixed. There is a definite time. It won't be put off. It won't be hastened. When it does come here, and by the way, that's been said before. So both Bruce R. McConkie and I think both Joseph Fielding Smith have said it, that the second coming, it's not like we can affect when it happens by our righteousness, and the world can't really do it by its wickedness. It's a definite time, just like he says here. When it does come there, there will be this war, bloodshed, and difficulty which surpass anything that has ever happened. I rather surmise that there will be a little period of time involved, that this won't just happen overnight. When you see the sort of thing that we just saw over in Palestine, you begin to wonder and think, how are things working around? There are one set of nations in the world seemingly on one side, and another set on the other side, meaning Russia on one hand and us on the other. It seems like this is a little of the initial ferment and preparatory historical events that lead up to the day when the great cataclysm will break forth. Now, that is interesting because right now we're having this thing go on with Russia where they're invading Ukraine. And I don't know how that will unfold in the future, but it feels like alliances are kind of being galvanized. And we've talked about this recently, how it seems like more and more you have Iran, China, Russia that are kind of like coming together. Recently, Saudi Arabia uh, has been in talks with Iran, brokered by China, to kind of galvanize their relations, And so Saudi Arabia, which for a long time has been more aligned with the West, it looks like that's changing right now, right? Um, and then if you watch my video about World War III, are we in World War III? You have to wonder, are things going south really quick? Because there's different revolutions and things that are trying to take place right now. In Iran, as far as I know, they're still dealing with the Iran protests. In Georgia, the country of Georgia. Um, and then you actually have some taking place in Israel. Now, this is because of the judicial overhaul, but with this weaponization of these psychological operations and weaponization of revolutions, you have to wonder if there aren't outside forces at work in Israel to help that along. Does that make sense? It's interesting that Iran and Israel at the same time seem to be under pressure of protests and, you know, uh, borderline insurrection, right? So, I don't know, but there's been a lot of stuff going on this century, and it's all been kind of like heating up, and it has been, or it's been like preparing the way. The way has been prepared since, well, I don't know, the first couple world wars, really, when you think about it. But anyway, and for the entire time that Israel's been a country, essentially the whole world has been against it. I feel like that's already taken care of if you're, thinking about the whole world being against Israel. All right, so going back, okay, question. As we take each one of chase objects, or sorry, as we take each one of chase subjects and think that each one occurred by 1836, that doesn't seem like a great deal of prophecy to me. As an example, my father lived, believed in all these things, and he died. Now I'm going on. What's this day going to when's this day going to come? What value is it to prepare for hundreds of years from now when I won't even be there? Bruce R. McConkie. All right, you two men at the same station at the same hour tomorrow. That's our lesson tomorrow. I think we're going to come up with some things tomorrow that are a little different than people have ordinarily supposed as to why the coming of Christ is kept a little indefinite as to the cruel moment. Question. I think crucial moment. Gosh, whoever transcribed this. Okay, question. Now, this particular condition, the wars and so on, what then is our responsibility as a people with regards uh, to the peacemaking effort in the world today? It seems that as a people, we've sort of taken the attitude that these things have to be, therefore we'll sit back and let them be. Bruce R. McConkie. Well, they're going to be, it's inevitable, but on the other hand, any of us who can live the way we ought to are going to be blessed and benefited. Plus anybody else who will come and join with us. There's the phrase, but my people will I preserve. That's what he said to Enoch, isn't it? Talking about the second coming and the wars that will be on the earth incident to the second coming. This statement would be in the 7th chapter of Moses, along toward the end. But my people will I preserve. There's going to be some preserving, protecting care for those who have come out of the world and accepted the gospel. This doesn't mean that none of us will be killed or that the atomic bombs won't land in communities where we are, but he's going to preserve the saints, at least in the ultimate. Let me just put a little something on the board, which you may say in part speculation, but on the other hand, it's quite an interesting thing to try to pin this business down. Let's do it by reading the prophet's statement quoted in the text here on page 666. Interesting number. Dr. Cowan says, is there any significance in the page number? That just hit me. If there is, it is pure destiny. First of all, this was a period where there were some people, I think they're called Millerites, somebody at least, who thought the second coming was going to be in that day. Comment, 1842. And yeah, we've talked about the Millerites on this channel because Joseph Smith said that you can't use the Bible to calculate when the second coming is going to happen. And that's what people do. People look at those numbers that are, especially in Daniel and Revelation, and they think that they're supposed to be used to calculate the time. And Joseph Smith spoke against that, but that's in a previous video. Bruce R. McConkie, they had announced it, hadn't they? Meaning the Millerites. It was Father Miller. I don't remember his first name, but he set like a date. Comment, yes, you bet. They stood in the churchyard in white robes waiting for him to come. I'm sure there's a lot of disappointment on that day. Bruce R. McConkie, this is what happened to some people in the mission field where I was before I got there. And this is what they said. They went out into the field to be caught up to meet the Lord in the air, and the minister figured he should be the first one who was caught up as the shepherd of the flock, and he got on the haystack to be a hen. Somebody lit the haystack on fire. It burned. He was asleep in the hot sun on top of the haystack. As the fire came up, the smudge and the smoke, he jumped up, threw his arm in the air, and said, "The day has arrived, the hour is at hand, and I'm in hell just like I thought I would be." In this day, people were teaching that the Lord was going to come. On April 6, 1843 conference, Joseph Smith said, near the bottom of the page, were I going to prophesy, I would say the end of the world, or the end would not come in 1844, 45, 46, or in 40 years. There are those of the rising generation who will not taste death till Christ comes. Well, Saturday night in the stake president's home in New Orleans, I guess the program was on that night. I don't know, but the kids were talking about somebody who had been on television who had a sister who died 150 years ago. Maybe this was on our TV out here. Here's an instance of a living person whose sister died 150 years ago. These sort of things are possible. Here the prophet said in 1843, there are those of the rising generation who won't taste of death until Christ comes. What is the rising generation? Webster says it is the generation that has just commenced. In effect, it is the first child born of the current parents. Assume a situation where two 18-year-old people had a child in 1843. And that child would be the first one of the rising generation. Then assume this man marries another woman, which is what involved in this 150-year deal, has another child when he's 78 of age. That's not at all impossible, married to a young woman. So you're up to 1893. So you're up to 1893, aren't you? Somebody has been born who is a member of that same generation. And so here in 1967, oh, okay. So this is in 1967. So this is well before Millennial Messiah. So that's why he doesn't really know or hasn't like really thought out the 10 lost tribes and some of the other things. Okay, so here in 1967, there are still millions of people living on Earth who were members of the rising generation in the day that the prophet apparently said, some of those will not taste death until Christ comes. Section 77, questions and answers, says that Christ will come in the beginning of the 7,000 years, if our calendar has any reasonable accuracy. If it's anywhere correct, we are approaching the day when the 7,000 years will commence. Now, I don't know when Christ is coming. The fact of the matter is, if we took another few aspects of this subject, this is in the text, we find that there are some things that have to transpire that clearly have not transpired that we might have put in this list, although we don't get them from the scriptures. One of the things apparently from the prophet's statement is that we have to build a temple in Jerusalem, and he makes the comment that it will take some time to rebuild the walls and build the temple. Oh, no, this is talking about Old Jerusalem. Okay. This must be done before the second coming. This will be done, of course, by the church, because temple keys are vested in the president of the church. So there are some events that have to transpire in this list that we didn't put on the board, which indicates that the second coming the second coming has to be some years at least away. The general overall concept is that we can build a very good case that we, the saints, know the approximate time, the generations, so to speak, the fact that it's closely approaching without being able to pin it down to the exact time. So you guys, it's stuff like this. Now, oh gosh, let's look at a few things because I'm wondering a few things here. So Bruce R. McConkie in 1967. So he, at that time, according to this, he was in the first council of the 70. And it sounds like he's like teaching a class. I don't know if this is just like a series that he's giving as a 70 or what's going on. But he wasn't an apostle until a few years later in 1972. And So right now we're talking from the point of view of someone that's in the Council of the 70. Oh, he was in the army and he was a lieutenant colonel. I didn't know that. Okay, so anyway, I want to pull up another playlist. And if you have not watched this playlist, I would highly recommend that you watch this playlist. It's about the BYU Jerusalem Center. There's a lot of people that kind of that just kind of wave this off, that no, this is not a temple. It was not meant to be a temple. It wasn't built to be a temple. No, it wasn't built to be a temple. It was built to be a visitor center. But that doesn't mean that the Lord can't turn it into a temple. And it doesn't have to be the type of temple that we have right now, where you do initiatories, endowments. In New Jerusalem, the 24 temple complex, those 24 temples were not all going to be the type of temple as what we think right now. They were going to be for different purposes. Okay? And the same may very well hold true about the temple in Jerusalem. The church put a lot of effort, and there were a lot of miracles that went into play to make the BYU Jerusalem Center a reality. And Jeffrey R. Holland, who drops a lot of hints, he's a hint dropper. He said a very enigmatic statement about it. Jeffrey R. Holland, BYU Jerusalem Center, dimly future. Well, that should pull it up. Okay. That's fine. Let's just go to the bottom here. Oh, here we go. Okay. So this is Jeffrey R. Holland. The full potential of the BYU Jerusalem Center is still unrealized. Quote from Jeffrey R. Holland. I don't know what it will mean a generation after we're gone or what future purposes the Lord will have for it, but I hope students from all over the world can be blessed by it. My testimony to you is that the Lord wanted that center to be built and has it there for great purposes that we now see only dimly. So that's kind of a weird thing to say if that it's just destined to continue to be a campus part of BYU. You might argue, well, there's a lot of good work that's being done there. Our students are going there learning how to smash grapes with their feet and make wine the authentic way. And then they're, learning about the Near East, and that knowledge will be important in the future. Well, okay, yeah, I'm sure it will be. But I'm pretty sure that the two missionaries that died, okay, there were two missionaries that were in Israel. This was back during the time of the Ottoman Empire. Uh, they died in Israel, okay, and because they were buried there and had tombstones, it gave the church the legal um, there's a requirement that the church had to have an official presence in the country before a certain time. Well, I think before the founding of Israel, and so because of those two tomb headstones, the church was able to legally be recognized in Israel for the purposes of owning and leasing land. Okay, and the fact that the BYU Jerusalem Center is in Jerusalem, but not just that it's in Jerusalem, but it's on the same mountain ridge as the Mount of Olives. So you have the Mount of Olives, but further up the same ridge, you have Mount Scopus, and that's where you have, here it is, the BYU Jerusalem Center. Not too far from where Christ is going to set foot to save the Jews during that final war. Okay? And by the way, we've looked at a lot of things with this center. A lot. The architecture, specifically how this top view right here, if you look at this portion, I know that there's more to the building over here, and I know that there's like the lower levels, like dorms down here. But if you're looking at just like this part right here, this matches up with Solomon's temple. Maybe not like the uh, absolute measurements, but I'm talking about the proportionate. So proportionally, it matches Solomon's temple, the second temple, the tabernacle, because they're all the same dimensions essentially. I talk about that in my playlist. I've done a lot of work on this. The architecture, what the things that they have there, um, the story behind it. This is no just it's just for because the church wants to learn more about the Middle East and give students the opportunity to go there. No, 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 no. Now, some of you that are new to the channel that have gone to the BYU Jerusalem Center, you're screaming, "No, we're not supposed to talk about that." No, we have a non-proselytizing agreement. We're not supposed to proselytize in Israel. Okay. Um, that doesn't mean that we can't talk about the BYU Jerusalem Center. And there's just so much I could. This is turning into a video that I want to like do all about the BYU Jerusalem Center, but that's going to have to be for another time. Just watch the playlist. Watch the playlist. Don't say anything. If you're about to say anything that this can't be a temple, don't talk to me until you've watched the playlist. Especially this one right here, BYU Jerusalem Center. Where does this yellow line lead to? That'll blow your mind. So will this one. How does the layout of the BYU Jerusalem Center compare to the ancient temples? And all of these. Are we looking at future temples, Independence Visitor Center, and BYU Jerusalem Center? And oh, what do you know? They look pretty similar. So watch this first before you tell me that it can't become a temple. Okay? I don't care if you went to BYU in the 80s or 90s and what a professor said that it could or could not be. Your professor is not the Lord, okay? And the Lord can do whatever he wants. And he'll do it in the right way. The church isn't going to go against the Israeli government, like I've said. It's going to obey the law. But the Lord can do whatever he wants. Okay, so continuing on. Well, I think that's actually the end of it. Yeah, that's the end of it. So he just kind of wraps up. So there is some good information in here. We have to take it in the context that we can't really verify this. I haven't been able to verify that this is actually from BYU, but it really seems like it's legitimate. I didn't see anything in here that would suggest that it's not. But secondly, we have to take that time frame into account that it's from 1967. And Bruce R. McConkie definitely, his ideas developed over time to where now he does have, or at the end of his life, he did end up with definite stances on as far as like the 10 lost tribes go. Like I said, there's the one that we read, but there's also, well, I mean, it's all over Millennial Messiah. In Millennial Messiah, he says in no uncertain terms that there's no main group. Okay. What else was I going to say? I can't remember. It'd be worth your time if you have questions about these things like the 10 lost tribes and you don't know what I'm referring to check out my spreadsheet. This is uploaded to the cloud. The link for it is in the description below. You can read through this and go through all the tabs down here at the bottom. You can't change anything, but you can read it. Sometimes you'll have to like double click on something to pop the entire thing out like this. Okay. But you can copy from it if you want to copy it onto your own work that you're doing. But I would recommend looking at this and then looking at my timeline, rising generation. Okay, and you can read all these statements by prophets and apostles about generations. Look right here. Ezra Taft Benson, make no mistake about it, you are a marked generation. And there's just so many more just like that. It's pretty clear that the generation is here and that it's been here for a while. And I would argue that generation that's being referred to is President Nelson's generation to make the Joseph Smith statement true. I could be wrong about that, or it might be a little bit off, but I think that's why it's so significant that President Nelson is almost 100 years old, that he's going to reach 100 years old in the year 2024. This year he'll be 99. Next year he'll be 100 years old. So, all right. Well, that's going to be it for this one. So thanks again, Sean Eddy, for sending this to us. It's definitely something to consider, and I thought there was some pretty good stuff in there. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.